Raymond had been working as a janitor at one of the biggest corporate firms in the city for almost 8 years now. 8 long years of mopping floors, emptying trash cans, cleaning bathrooms, and making sure every glass window sparkled like new. He knew that building better than anyone. He knew which elevator made a weird sound on the 4th floor. He knew which office door always got stuck in the winter. He even knew the exact time when the heating system would kick in and make that low humming noise that nobody else seemed to notice. But knowing a building and belonging in it are two very different things. To the executives in their expensive suits, and the managers with their fancy coffee orders, Raymond was invisible. They walked past him every single day without a glance. Sometimes they stepped over his mop bucket like it was just another piece of furniture. Sometimes they talked about private company matters right in front of him, as if he was not even there. As if he could not hear. As if he did not exist. Raymond never complained. He just did his job, went home, and came back the next day to do it all over again. He was 53 years old. His hands were rough from years of hard work. His back ached most mornings. But he pushed through, because that is what life had taught him to do. He had a small apartment on the east side of the city, nothing fancy, but it was home. The only bright spot in his life was his daughter, who was now 24 and working as a nurse at the city hospital. She was everything to him. After his wife passed away 4 years ago from a sudden illness, his daughter became his whole world. One Thursday afternoon, while Raymond was cleaning the break room on the 12th floor, he noticed a golden envelope sitting on the counter. It had the company logo on it, and underneath it said, "You are invited," in fancy letters. He picked it up, thinking someone had left it behind by mistake, but when he turned it over, he saw his own name printed on the back. He blinked a few times, not believing what he was seeing. He opened the envelope slowly and pulled out a thick card with elegant writing. It was an invitation to the company's 50th anniversary gala. The celebration was being hosted at the CEO's private mansion, and according to the invitation, every employee was welcome to attend. Every employee. That included him. Raymond stared at the card for a long time. In all his years working there, he had never been invited to anything. Not a holiday party. Not a company lunch. Nothing. He always assumed those events were only for the office workers, the managers, the people who wore ties and carried laptops. Not for people like him. His first instinct was to throw the invitation away. What was he going to do at a fancy party with people who did not even know his name? People who looked through him like he was made of glass? But that night, when he got home, his daughter noticed the envelope sticking out of his jacket pocket. "What is that?" she asked, pulling it out before he could stop her. She read it quickly, and her eyes lit up. "Dad, this is amazing. You have to go." Raymond shook his head. "It is not for me. Those people. They do not want me there. I would not fit in." His daughter sat down next to him and took his hand. "You have worked at that company for almost a decade. You have earned your place just as much as anyone else. You deserve to be there." He wanted to argue, but something in her voice made him pause. She sounded just like her mother. Strong, certain, full of quiet faith in him. So, against every instinct telling him to stay home, Raymond decided to go. The night of the gala arrived faster than he expected. He put on his only suit, a dark gray one that he had bought years ago for his wife's funeral. It still fit, though the fabric had faded a little around the shoulders. He looked at himself in the mirror and tried to convince himself that he belonged at this party. He did not believe it, but he went anyway. The CEO's mansion was everything Raymond had imagined and more. It sat on top of a hill surrounded by tall iron gates and perfectly trimmed hedges. The driveway was lined with expensive cars. Valets in white gloves were opening doors for guests who stepped out looking like they had walked straight out of a magazine. Raymond had taken the bus. He walked through the front gates slowly, his heart beating faster with every step. The front doors were massive, made of dark wood with golden handles. A man in a black suit checked his invitation and nodded, letting him pass. The moment Raymond stepped inside, he felt it. That familiar feeling of being out of place. The kind of feeling that settles in your chest and makes you want to disappear. The main hall was enormous, Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm golden light over everything. Waiters moved through the crowd carrying silver trays of food and drinks. A string quartet played soft music in the corner. Everywhere Raymond looked, he saw designer dresses and tailored suits. He saw perfect smiles and easy laughter, and then he saw the stares. At first it was just one person. A woman in a red dress who glanced at him with a confused expression, like she was trying to figure out why he was there. Then a man near the bar whispered something to his friend, and they both looked in his direction. Raymond kept his head down and moved toward the edge of the room. He found a quiet spot near a tall window and stood there, hoping to blend into the background. But blending in was not easy when people were already talking. "Is that the janitor?" someone muttered behind him. "I think it is. Why is he here? Did someone actually invite him, or did he just walk in?" Raymond pretended not to hear. He stared out the window at the garden below, his jaw tight, his hands clenched at his sides. He told himself it did not matter. He told himself he had every right to be there, but the whispers kept coming, and each one felt like a small cut. Then a voice rose above the rest. Loud, sharp, impossible to ignore. "Well, this is certainly a surprise." Raymond turned and found himself face to face with a tall woman in a black dress. Her hair was pulled back tight, and her smile was the kind that never reached her eyes. He recognized her immediately. Everyone at the company knew who she was. She was the senior vice president of marketing, one of the most powerful people in the building. Her name was known for two reasons: her success and her cruelty. She looked Raymond up and down like he was a stain on the carpet. "I was not aware this event was open to everyone," she said, loud enough for the people nearby to hear. A few of them laughed. Raymond said nothing. He just stood there, his face calm, even though inside he was burning. The woman tilted her head. "No response? I suppose there is not much to say, is there?" She turned to her friends with a dramatic sigh. "I do hope the company is not planning to make this a tradition, letting anyone walk in off the street simply because they can hold a mop." More laughter. Raymond felt his hands trembling, but he kept them at his sides. He thought about leaving. He thought about walking straight out the door and never looking back. But then something inside him shifted. A quiet voice, somewhere deep in his chest, told him to stay. Told him that running would only prove them right. So he stayed. He found a glass of water, stood in his corner, and waited. He did not know it yet, but the night was far from over. Raymond stayed in his corner for the next hour, watching the party unfold from a distance. He sipped his water slowly, and kept his eyes on the floor most of the time. The whispers had died down, but he could still feel people glancing at him now and then. He was like a scratch on a perfect painting. Everyone noticed, but nobody wanted to be the one to point it out too loudly. The mansion was beautiful, he had to admit. The kind of beautiful that felt almost unreal. Everything was polished and perfect. The floors, the walls, the furniture, even the guests looked like they had been polished before arriving. Raymond thought about his small apartment with the leaky faucet and the cracked tile in the bathroom. He thought about how one chandelier in this room probably cost more than everything he owned, but none of that made him feel small. What made him feel small was the way people looked at him. Or rather, the way they refused to look at him at all. Around 9 o'clock, the string quartet stopped playing and the lights dimmed slightly. A man in a dark suit stepped onto a small stage at the front of the room. Raymond recognized him immediately. It was the CEO himself, Mr. Whitmore. He was in his early 60s, with silver hair and a calm, serious face. He was the kind of man who did not need to raise his voice to get attention. When he spoke, people listened. "Good evening, everyone," Mr. Whitmore said into a microphone. "Thank you all for being here tonight. 50 years is no small milestone, and I am proud to celebrate it with each and every one of you." The crowd clapped politely. Mr. Whitmore smiled and continued. "Tonight is about more than business. It is about the people who make this company what it is, so I thought we might have a little fun." He gestured toward the corner of the room. and for the first time, Raymond noticed it. A piano. It was a grand piano, black and shining under the soft lights. It sat on a small raised platform near the windows, looking like it had been placed there more for decoration than for playing. But now, a spotlight was slowly turning toward it. "This piano has been in my family for 3 generations, Mr. Whitmore said. "It has not been played at one of our events in many years. But tonight, I thought we might change that." He looked out at the crowd with a playful smile. "So here is my challenge. If anyone here would like to take a seat and play something for us, the floor is yours." There was a murmur of laughter and nervous energy in the room. A few people nudged their friends. Someone near the front shouted, "You go first, boss." Mr. Whitmore laughed and shook his head. "I am afraid my talents lie elsewhere. But surely someone here has a hidden gift." For a moment, nobody moved. Then a man in a gray suit stepped forward. He was one of the senior managers. Raymond remembered seeing him on the 10th floor. The man walked to the piano with a confident smile and sat down. He cracked his knuckles dramatically and began to play. It was not good. He stumbled through a few notes, trying to play something that might have been a nursery rhyme. The crowd laughed warmly, and the man stood up with a bow, clearly not embarrassed at all. Another person followed. Then another. Each one played a few messy notes, got a round of applause, and returned to the crowd. It became a kind of game. People were laughing and clapping. The atmosphere in the room was lighter now, more relaxed. Raymond watched quietly from his corner. His chest felt tight, not because of the party or the people, but because of the piano. He had not touched a piano in almost 16 years. There was a time in his life when music was everything to him. When he was young, his mother had taught him to play on an old upright piano they kept in their tiny living room. She had been a music teacher before she got sick, and she passed on everything she knew to him. By the time Raymond was 15, he could play Chopin, Beethoven, Debussy. He played with his whole heart, every single time. When he was 18, he was offered a scholarship to one of the best music schools in the country. It was the proudest moment of his life. His mother had cried when she heard the news. She had hugged him so tight he could barely breathe. But life has a way of breaking plans. His father had a stroke 2 months before Raymond was supposed to leave. There was no one else to take care of him. No siblings. No relatives nearby. His mother was already gone by then. So Raymond gave up the scholarship. He stayed home. He worked. He took care of his father until the old man passed 5 years later. By then, the music had faded into the background. Raymond got married, had a daughter, and spent most of his time just trying to survive. There was no room for dreams anymore. No time for playing. The piano became a memory. Something locked away in a part of his heart that he rarely visited. And now, standing in this grand mansion, watching strangers laugh and stumble over keys they did not understand, Raymond felt that old ache rising in his chest again. He shook his head and looked away. This was not the time. This was not the place. But then, as if the universe was not done testing him, that sharp voice returned. "Oh, this is just too entertaining." It was her, the woman in the black dress, the senior vice president. She had moved closer to the piano now, standing near the edge of the small stage with a glass of champagne in her hand. Her friends were gathered around her, laughing at something she had just said. She scanned the crowd with an amused expression. Surely there is someone else brave enough to try. Come on, people. Do not be shy. Her eyes swept the room, and then they landed on Raymond. He felt his stomach drop. "What about you?" she called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. Raymond did not move. She smiled wider. "Yes, you. The gentleman in the gray suit near the window." She tilted her head. "You have been very quiet all evening. Perhaps you have been hiding some secret talent?" A few people turned to look at him. Some of them were already smiling, waiting for the joke. Raymond's voice came out calm, but quiet. "I am fine where I am. Thank you." The woman raised an eyebrow. "Oh, come now. Do not be modest. You work with your hands all day. Do you not? She paused, letting the words hang in the air. Surely all that mopping has given you some sense of rhythm. The room erupted in laughter. Raymond felt his face grow hot. His hands clenched at his sides. He wanted to say something. He wanted to defend himself. But the words would not come. He just stood there, frozen, while the laughter echoed off the high ceilings. The woman was not done. She turned to her friends and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, I suppose we should be grateful he showed up at all. It is not every day we get to see how the other half lives. More laughter. A few uncomfortable glances. But nobody spoke up. Nobody told her to stop. Raymond took a slow breath. His heart was pounding now. Every part of him wanted to turn around and walk out of that room, to disappear, to never come back, and he almost did. He actually took a step toward the door, but then something stopped him. A memory. A voice. His mother's voice, soft and steady. Like it had been all those years ago. Music is not about proving anything to anyone, she had told him once. It is about saying what words cannot. Do not ever let anyone take that from you. Raymond stopped walking. He turned around slowly, and without a word, he began walking toward the piano. The laughter faded. People began to notice. The woman in the black dress lowered her champagne glass, a confused look crossing her face. Raymond reached the platform and stood before the piano. The spotlight felt warm against his skin. He looked out at the crowd, at the faces that had ignored him, at the faces that had mocked him. Then he sat down. The room was completely silent now. Raymond placed his hands on the keys, his rough fingers resting gently on the smooth ivory, and for the first time in 16 years, he prepared to play. The piano bench felt cool beneath him. Raymond sat very still, his hands resting on his lap, not yet touching the keys. The spotlight above him was warm, almost too warm, and he could feel a single drop of sweat forming at the back of his neck. The room had gone completely quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes you aware of your own heartbeat. 100 faces stared at him from across the hall. Some looked curious, some looked amused. A few were already whispering, waiting for the punchline to a joke they were sure was coming. Raymond did not look at any of them. He looked at the piano. It was a beautiful instrument. A grand piano with a deep black finish that reflected the golden light from the chandeliers above. The keys were real ivory, yellowed slightly with age but still perfectly smooth. He could tell just by looking at it that this piano had been loved. It had been cared for. It had a history, just like him. Raymond took a slow breath and let his fingers drift upward, hovering just above the keys. He did not press down yet. He was not ready. His hands were shaking slightly, and he needed a moment to steady himself. In the silence, his mind began to drift. He thought about his mother. She had been a small woman with gentle hands and a voice like honey. She used to sit beside him at their old upright piano in their tiny apartment and guide his fingers over the keys. She never yelled. She never got frustrated. She just smiled and said, "Again, my love. Try it again." She had been a music teacher once, before she got sick. She taught piano to children in the neighborhood for years, always for less money than she deserved because she knew most families could not afford more. She believed that music was a gift that should be shared, not sold. When Raymond was 7 years old, she told him something he never forgot. "Music does not come from your fingers," she said, pressing her hand against his small chest. "It comes from here, from your heart. Your fingers just help it find its way out." He had not understood what she meant back then. He was too young. But as he got older, as he practiced and grew and began to truly feel the music moving through him, he finally understood. Playing the piano was never about hitting the right notes. It was about telling a story. It was about opening your chest and letting everything inside pour out through your hands. His mother passed away when Raymond was 16, cancer. It had taken her slowly, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but a tired body and a peaceful smile. She had held his hand on her last day and told him she was proud of him, that she always would be. Raymond had played at her funeral. A soft piece by Debussy that she had always loved, His hands had trembled the whole time, but he made it through. When he finished, he closed the piano lid and walked away. He did not touch another piano for 2 years after that. It was not until he received the scholarship offer that he finally sat down to play again. And when he did, all the grief and love and loneliness he had been holding inside came flooding out. He played for 3 hours straight that night, alone, in an empty practice room. Tears streaming down his face. That was the night he decided he would go to music school, that he would honor his mother's memory by doing what she had always believed he could do. But life had other plans. His father's stroke came out of nowhere. One day, the man was fine, and the next he could not speak or move the right side of his body. There was no one else to take care of him. No family. No support. Just Raymond. So he made a choice. He gave up the scholarship. He stayed home. He got a job cleaning offices at night, so he could be with his father during the day. He fed him, bathed him, sat beside his bed and read him books when the silence became too heavy. His father lived for another 5 years. He never fully recovered. But he was comfortable. He was cared for. And when he finally passed, Raymond was right there beside him, holding his hand just like he had done with his mother. After that, Raymond met a woman who would become his wife. They had a daughter together. And for a while, life was good. Not easy, but good. There was no time for music anymore. But there was love. There was warmth. There was family. Then his wife got sick too. It happened fast. A diagnosis. A few months of treatment. And then she was gone. Raymond had not played the piano once during those years. Not when his daughter was born. Not when his wife was dying. Not even at her funeral. The music inside him had gone quiet, buried under the weight of everything he had to carry. And now, 16 years later, he was sitting at a grand piano, in a mansion full of people who thought he was nothing. He could feel their eyes on him. He could hear the faint whispers starting again. Someone near the back laughed softly, probably making a joke at his expense. But Raymond did not care anymore, because in that moment, he was not thinking about them. He was thinking about his mother, about his father, about his wife, about all the years he had spent surviving instead of living, about all the dreams he had buried just to make it through another day. He thought about his daughter, about the way she had looked at him the night before the party and said, "You deserve to be there, Dad." Maybe she was right. Maybe he did deserve something. Not their approval. Not their respect. He did not need that. He had stopped needing that a long time ago. What he needed was to remember who he was. Not a janitor. Not an invisible man. Not someone to be laughed at and dismissed. He was the boy who used to play Chopin in a tiny apartment with a broken piano. He was the young man who was once good enough to earn a place at one of the best music schools in the country. He was the son of a woman who believed that music came from the heart. And that boy, that young man, that son, was still inside him. Buried. Maybe. Quiet. Yes. But not gone. Never gone. Raymond closed his eyes. He let the noise of the room fade away. The whispers. The laughter. The clinking of glasses and the rustle of expensive dresses. All of it melted into nothing. All he could hear now was his own breathing. Slow, steady, calm. He placed his fingers gently on the keys. The ivory was cool and smooth beneath his rough skin. It felt familiar, like coming home after a very long journey. He thought of his mother one last time. Her soft voice, her gentle hands, her quiet faith in him. And then, without a word, without a glance at the crowd, Raymond pressed down. A single note filled the room. It was clear and pure, rising up toward the high ceilings and echoing off the walls. It hung in the air like a heartbeat. Then came another note, and another, and slowly, like water beginning to flow after a long drought, the music began. Raymond did not play for the people watching him. He did not play to prove anything or to win anyone's approval. He played for his mother, for his father, for his wife. He played for his daughter. He played for the boy he used to be, and the man he had become. He played for himself. And as the first few measures of Chopin's Ballade in G minor began to fill the room, something in the air shifted. The whispers stopped, the laughter died, and for the first time that night, the room truly listened. The first few notes floated through the air like a question, soft, gentle, almost uncertain. They rose from the piano and drifted across the room, brushing past the chandeliers and settling into the silence. Raymond kept his eyes closed. His fingers moved slowly at first, finding their way across the keys like a man walking through a house he had not visited in many years. The melody was careful, hesitant, as if it was not sure it was welcome. But then something changed. As the notes continued to build, Raymond felt the music begin to wake up inside him. It started somewhere deep in his chest, a warmth that spread outward through his arms and into his hands. His fingers stopped trembling, his breathing slowed, and the hesitation in the melody began to fade. The opening passage of Chopin's Ballade in G minor is delicate and haunting. It tells the story of something lost, something longed for, something just out of reach. Raymond had played this piece 100 times when he was younger. He knew every note, every pause, every breath. But tonight, for the first time, he was not just playing the music, he was living it. The melody grew stronger. The notes came faster now, rolling out of the piano like waves on a shore. Raymond's hands moved with a confidence that surprised even him. 16 years had passed, but his fingers still remembered. His heart still remembered. In the crowd, people began to shift. The smirks faded. The whispers stopped. One by one, guests who had been laughing just moments ago now stood frozen, their glasses halfway to their lips, their conversations forgotten. No one had expected this. The woman in the black dress, the one who had mocked him so cruelly, stood near the edge of the stage with her champagne glass still in her hand. Her expression had changed completely. The arrogance was gone. In its place was something she had not felt in a long time: confusion, and then, slowly, something close to shame. Raymond did not see any of this. His eyes were still closed, his body swaying gently with the rhythm of the music. He was no longer in that mansion. He was somewhere else entirely. He was in his mother's living room, 7 years old, sitting beside her on the creaky piano bench. He could smell her perfume. He could hear her voice, soft and patient, guiding him through a simple melody. He was in the hospital room where his father spent his final days, holding the old man's hand and humming a tune his mother used to sing. He was in the church where he said goodbye to his wife, standing alone at the front while the world collapsed around him. All of it was there in the music. Every moment, every loss, every ounce of love and grief and hope that he had carried with him for all these years. The ballade moved into its middle section, where the melody becomes more intense, more urgent. Raymond's hands flew across the keys now, striking chords that echoed through the room like thunder. The music was no longer soft. It was powerful. It was demanding. It filled every corner of the mansion, reaching into places that polite conversation and expensive champagne could never touch. A woman near the back of the room felt tears forming in her eyes. She did not know why. She had never heard this piece before, and she did not know the man playing it. But something in the music reached inside her and pulled at something she had buried a long time ago. She was not the only one. Across the room, people were reacting in ways they did not expect. A man in a tailored suit looked down at the floor, suddenly thinking about his father, who had passed away last spring. A young woman near the bar pressed her hand to her chest, remembering a breakup she thought she had moved past. An older couple standing by the window reached for each other's hands without saying a word. The music was doing something to them. It was breaking through the walls they had built. The polite smiles, the careful words, the masks they wore every single day. For just a few minutes, all of that was stripped away. And in the center of it all sat Raymond, a janitor, a widower, a father, a man who had given up everything and never asked for anything in return. His hands never stopped moving. The music swelled and fell, crashed and whispered, raged and wept. It was not just a performance. It was a confession, a prayer, a lifetime of silence finally given a voice. Mr. Whitmore, the the CEO, stood near the front of the crowd. He had not moved since the first note. His face was still, but his eyes glistened in the soft light. He had heard many pianists in his life, professionals, concert performers, people who had trained at the finest schools in the world. None of them had ever played like this. This was not technique. This was something deeper. Something raw and real and impossibly human. The ballade reached its final movement. The tempo slowed again, returning to the gentle, aching melody from the beginning. But now it was different. Now it carried the weight of everything that had come before. The storms had passed. The thunder had faded. What remained was quiet, fragile, and heartbreakingly beautiful. Raymond played the final notes with his eyes still closed. His fingers lingered on the keys, letting each note ring out for as long as it could. The last chord hung in the air like a breath held too long, and then it was over. Raymond lifted his hands from the piano and let them fall to his lap. He sat perfectly still, his head bowed, his chest rising and falling slowly. The room was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the chandeliers above. For a long moment, it felt like time itself had stopped. Then, from somewhere near the back of the room, a single pair of hands began to clap. It was slow at first, hesitant, like the person was not sure if it was appropriate. But then another pair of hands joined in, and another, and another. Within seconds, the entire room erupted into applause. It was not polite applause. It was not the kind of clapping people do at the end of a boring speech because they are supposed to. This was something else. This was real. People were standing. People were cheering. A few were wiping tears from their eyes and clapping at the same time. Raymond finally opened his eyes. He looked out at the crowd and saw something he had not seen in a very long time. Respect. Not pity. Not amusement. Not the uncomfortable politeness people show when they do not know what else to do. Real, honest respect. He did not know what to do. He had not planned for this. He had not planned for any of this. He had just sat down and played. Slowly, Raymond stood up from the piano bench. His legs felt weak. His hands were still trembling. But for a different reason now. The applause continued. It filled the room, bouncing off the walls and the windows and the high ceilings. It wrapped around him like something warm and safe. For the first time that night, Raymond did not feel invisible. He felt seen. He gave a small nod to the crowd, just a slight dip of his head, and stepped away from the piano. As he walked off the small stage, the applause did not stop. If anything, it grew louder. People reached out to touch his arm as he passed. They said things like, "Beautiful," and "incredible," and "Where did you learn to play like that?" Raymond did not answer. He just kept walking, his heart still pounding, his mind still spinning. He had not played to impress anyone. He had not played to prove a point. He had played because, for one moment, he needed to remember who he was. And somehow, without meaning to, he had reminded everyone else of something too. That beauty can come from the most unexpected places, and that the people we overlook might be carrying something extraordinary inside them, something we never bothered to see. Raymond found a quiet corner near the back of the room and stood there, trying to catch his breath. His hands were still shaking. His heart was still racing. He felt like he had just run a marathon, even though he had only been sitting at a piano. The applause had finally faded, but the energy in the room had not. People kept glancing in his direction. Some smiled. Some whispered to each other. A few looked like they wanted to approach him, but were not sure if they should. Raymond did not know what to do with any of it. He had spent so many years being invisible that he had forgotten what it felt like to be noticed. A waiter passed by with a tray of water glasses, and Raymond took one gratefully. He drank it slowly, letting the cold liquid calm his nerves. His mind was still spinning. He could not believe what had just happened. He could not believe he had actually done it. For 16 years, he had kept the music locked away inside him. He had convinced himself that part of his life was over, that it belonged to a younger man, a different man, someone who no longer existed. But tonight, that man had come back, and Raymond did not know how to feel about it. Before he could gather his thoughts, a figure appeared in front of him. It was Mr. Whitmore. the CEO. He was shorter than Raymond had imagined, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. "That was extraordinary," Mr. Whitmore said, his voice low and sincere. "I have heard a lot of pianists in my life. Professionals. People who have played on stages all over the world. But I have never heard anyone play like that." Raymond did not know what to say. "Thank you, sir," he managed. Mr. Whitmore shook his head. "No. Thank you." He paused, looking at Raymond with a curious expression. "Where did you learn to play like that? Did you study somewhere?" Raymond hesitated. It had been so long since he had talked about any of this. "My mother taught me," he said quietly. "When I was young. She was a music teacher. She must have been remarkable." "She was." Mr. Whitmore nodded slowly. "And you never pursued it professionally? With talent like that, you could have gone anywhere." Raymond looked down at his hands. The same rough, calloused hands that mopped floors and scrubbed toilets. The same hands that had just played Chopin, like it was the easiest thing in the world. "Life got in the way," he said simply. "My father got sick. Then my wife. There was never a right time." However, Mr. Whitmore was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small business card. "I sit on the board of the city's music conservatory," he said. "We have a program for adult learners. People who had to put their dreams on hold for one reason or another." He held out the card. "I would like you to consider applying. Full scholarship. No cost to you." Raymond stared at the card. He did not take it right away. "I am 53 years old," he said. "I am not sure there is much point anymore." Mr. Whitmore smiled gently. "I heard you play tonight. Trust me, there is plenty of point." He pressed the card into Raymond's hand. "Think about it. That is all I ask." Before Raymond could respond, Mr. Whitmore gave him a small nod and walked away, disappearing back into the crowd. Raymond stood there holding the card, turning it over in his fingers. He did not know what to think. A scholarship. At his age, after everything, it felt like a dream. The kind you wake up from and immediately forget. He was still staring at the card when another figure approached. This time, his stomach tightened. It was her. The woman in the black dress, the one who had mocked him in front of everyone. She stopped a few feet away. Her arms crossed over her chest. She looked different now. Smaller, somehow. The sharp edges of her confidence had softened. She did not meet his eyes right away. "I owe you an apology," she said. Her voice was quieter than before, almost uncertain. Raymond waited. She took a breath. "What I said earlier. It was cruel. And unnecessary. I made assumptions about you that I had no right to make." She finally looked up at him. "I am sorry." Raymond studied her face. He could see that the apology was real. It was not easy for her to say. People like her were not used to admitting they were wrong. Part of him wanted to be angry. Part of him wanted to tell her exactly how her words had made him feel. How small. How worthless. How invisible. But another part of him, a quieter part, just felt tired. "You did not know," he said simply. "None of you did." She blinked, clearly expecting something harsher. Raymond continued. "That is the thing about people like me. You see us every day. We clean your offices. We empty your trash. We fix the things that break and mop the floors you walk on. But you never really see us." He paused. "You never ask who we are. What we have been through. What we carry with us." The woman's face changed. Something flickered in her eyes. Guilt, maybe. Or recognition. "You are right," she said softly. "I never asked." Raymond nodded. "Most people do not." He tucked the business card into his pocket. "But maybe now you will." He did not wait for a response. He simply turned and walked toward the door. The night air outside was cool and fresh. Raymond stood on the front steps of the mansion and looked up at the sky. The stars were faint, hidden behind the glow of the city lights. But they were there. They were always there. Even when you could not see them. He thought about the card in his pocket, about the scholarship, about the piano that had sat untouched in his heart for 16 years. He thought about his mother, about what she would say if she could see him now. She would probably smile. She would probably cry. And then, she would probably tell him to stop standing around and go practice. Raymond laughed softly to himself. It was a small sound, barely more than a breath, but it was real. When he got home that night, his daughter was waiting for him. She was sitting on the couch with a cup of tea, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Well?" she asked. "How was it?" Raymond sat down beside her. He did not say anything for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out the business card. His daughter took it and read it slowly. Her eyes grew wider with every word. "Dad," she whispered, "is this real?" Apparently. She looked at him, tears forming in her eyes. "Are you going to do it?" Raymond thought about the question. He thought about the years he had spent giving up pieces of himself, the scholarship he had walked away from, the music he had silenced, the dreams he had buried. He thought about his mother's voice, his father's hand, his wife's smile, and then he thought about tonight. About sitting at that piano and feeling, for the first time in 16 years, like himself again. "I think I might," he said. His daughter threw her arms around him and held on tight. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Raymond closed his eyes and hugged her back. He did not know what the future would hold. He did not know if he was too old, or too rusty, or too far gone to start again. But for the first time in a very long time, he was willing to find out. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything.